This is Ghost Rider's first transformation. Now, with every step he takes, flames ignite beneath his feet, until all the flesh on his body is consumed by the hellfire. After enduring endless agony, Johnny becomes a burning skeleton, the ultimate form of Ghost Rider. Armed with a hellfire chain and riding a flaming Harley, he appears in the mortal world every midnight to confront those sinners brimming with evil deeds. Though Johnny now possesses formidable power, he wasn't born this way. Originally, Johnny was an ordinary human, living with his father, Barton. From a young age, influenced by Barton, Johnny became an excellent motorcycle stunt rider at a young age. They performed in different places every day. Although they didn't make much money, their life was relatively happy. At this time, Johnny also met his first love, Roxanne, and they even planned to run away together the next day. However, when Johnny went home to pack his bags, he accidentally saw his father's medical report. It turned out his father was in the late stages of cancer. Seeing his loved one suffering from illness, Johnny felt utterly powerless. During this tough time, a strange old man approached him. He claimed he could cure Barton's cancer, but in exchange, Johnny had to offer his soul. Though Johnny was skeptical of Mephistopheles' words, he decided to try it to save his father's life. Eventually, Johnny signed the contract with his blood, but he failed to notice Mephistopheles' evil-filled eyes. The next morning, Johnny saw his father full of life, proving Mephistopheles didn't lie to him. Then, Johnny remembered his promise to Roxanne. After an argument with his father, Barton eventually agreed to Johnny's decision and even gave him his favorite Harley motorcycle. Just as Johnny was happily ready to leave, a huge explosion occurred at the performance site. It was an accident during Barton's stunt performance. By the time Johnny rushed to the scene, his father was barely alive and soon died in front of Johnny. Then, Johnny saw Mephistopheles and immediately confronted him, asking if his father's death was related to him. Mephistopheles replied that although he promised to cure Johnny's father's cancer, he never said he wouldn't kill him later. Now that Mephistopheles had fulfilled his promise, Johnny must also keep the contract he signed. After saying this, Mephistopheles disappeared. Although filled with rage, Johnny had to continue with his life. Time quickly moved on, and 10 years later, Johnny had become the hottest motorcycle stunt rider. He performed various dangerous and deadly stunts on the edge of life and death every day, because Johnny discovered a terrifying fact. Ever since he signed the contract with Mephistopheles, no matter what injuries he suffered, he would never die. Johnny used this feature to complete the stunts his father never could. Riding his father's Harley, he sped and flew across an entire football field, below which were 6 Blackhawk helicopters. If the stunt failed, Johnny would be shredded by the helicopters. In the end, the stunt performance ended perfectly. Although Johnny appeared to be in the limelight, this was not the life he wanted. It wasn't until he met Roxanne again one day that Johnny felt as if he had returned to the past. This time, Johnny finally seized the opportunity and used a classic move common among men. Under Johnny's passionate kiss, Roxanne eventually agreed to go on a date with him. However, just as Johnny was about to keep the date, he suddenly looked ahead coldly. It was Mephistopheles reappearing after 10 years, telling Johnny it was time to fulfill his contract. Mephistopheles needs Johnny to kill a man named Blackheart, who is also his son. Recently, fire rain suddenly fell from the sky, and Blackheart's figure appeared out of nowhere. No sooner had Blackheart arrived on Earth than he brutally slaughtered an entire bar. He then summoned 3 minions: Gressel, who can turn into sand; Wallow, who possesses great power in water; and Abigor, who is made of black smoke and is omnipresent. Now, they aim to find the San Venganza contract and release the evil spirits sealed within it. This way, Blackheart could replace his father's authority and completely control everything on Earth. With Mephistopheles' current power, he is no match for his son, so he turns to Johnny to clean house for him. Johnny initially wanted nothing to do with Mephistopheles. However, as Mephistopheles struck the ground with his staff, the contract's power immediately took effect. Johnny's motorcycle, as if alive, carried him swiftly toward the distance. The motorcycle's speed was unmatched, leaving behind a trail of hellfire sparks and lightning wherever it went. Johnny was then brought to a dilapidated warehouse, where he was flung from the suddenly halted motorcycle. Immediately, Johnny's eyes began to smoke, as a surge of energy erupted from within him. The first transformation into Ghost Rider was about to begin. With every step Johnny took, hellfire blazed beneath his feet, enduring endless agony as a force within him surged. Amid Johnny's roar, flames began to emerge from his body, every inch of his skin being devoured by the flames, yet his eyes grew brighter. Finally, Johnny completely transformed into a flaming skeleton, becoming the emissary of hell, Ghost Rider, and this was where Blackheart was hiding. A standoff between the two immediately ensued. To redeem his soul, Johnny had to fulfill the contract's terms, but Blackheart is very cunning. Abigor instantly charged out, and Johnny, caught off guard, was hung on the chains, his hellfire gradually extinguishing. Seeing Johnny so easily defeated, Blackheart burst into laughter, but in the next second, the hellfire reignited. Johnny pulled down the chains, making them his first weapon. Johnny then began to approach Blackheart, but just as he stepped out of the warehouse, his legs suddenly couldn't move. As it turns out, Wallow has a firm grip on Johnny in the water and a truck is speeding towards him. Amid Blackheart's laughter, Gressel slowly stepped down from the truck. Ghost Rider seemed to be easily handled. Just as Gressel was turning to leave, a palm suddenly pressed on his shoulder. The moment Gressel turned around, Johnny punched him to the ground, shattering Gressel's face with the blow. As Ghost Rider approached, Gressel pleaded for mercy, but Johnny showed no mercy. He swung the chain in his hand, tightly binding Gressel with it. Seeing his imminent death, Gressel prepared to call for help from his companions, but they had already disappeared. Eventually, under the burning of the hellfire, Gressel quickly turned into a pile of ashes. Then, Johnny whistled, and the motorcycle from afar immediately rushed over. Under the enchantment of hellfire, the motorcycle rapidly transformed. Eventually, the entire motorcycle was enveloped in flames. This is the exclusive mount of Ghost Rider, a flaming Harley that can ascend to the heavens and delve into the earth. Johnny then mounted his chariot, continuing his search for Blackheart. At this moment, Johnny spotted a robber by the roadside. Johnny instantly passed judgment on the robber, walking up to him and lifting him off the ground. Still trying to resist, the robber slammed his dagger into Johnny's shoulder, only to be shocked to find that it melted into iron on the spot. Under the robber's horrified gaze, Johnny directly used the penance stare. This unique skill of Ghost Rider allows the victim to see their own sins and feel the pain of all their victims. Eventually, the robber's soul was utterly consumed by fire. Ghost Rider set off again, alone in the night. Unknowingly, he arrived at his father's grave. As the sun finally rose from the east, the hellfire on Johnny's body extinguished, and he collapsed in front of his father's grave. When Johnny woke up again, he found himself lying in a strange place, saved by the caretaker of the cemetery. The caretaker knew all of Johnny's secrets. Then, the caretaker told Johnny that Ghost Rider is the devil's emissary on Earth, mainly responsible for hunting demons that escape from hell. They are like ordinary people during the day but can transform into Ghost Rider at night. The caretaker's place, once holy ground of a church, is inaccessible to all demons. Johnny could ensure his safety by staying here. However, after learning the truth, Johnny ultimately decided to leave. On his way home, Johnny was immediately arrested by the police. They had found his license plate at the crime scene and concluded he was the culprit behind a series of murders. Although Johnny vehemently denied it, the police did not believe his defense, and he was locked up in jail. The jail housed extremely violent criminals, and Johnny's inner hellfire began to stir again. At this moment, the prisoners started provoking Johnny, intending to teach the newcomer a lesson. As they were about to gang up on Johnny, with a burst of flames, he transformed into Ghost Rider once more. With a mere wave of his hand, the sturdy prison doors melted from the high temperature, and Johnny walked out of the police station. Outside, the flaming Harley was waiting. Johnny then mounted his chariot, continuing his search for Blackheart. Meanwhile, all the police were mobilized, attempting to capture Ghost Rider, and quickly surrounded him. Seeing this, Johnny rode his motorcycle and jumped off the bridge. To the amazement of onlookers, the motorbike quickly rose out of the water as the current surged. Ordinary water can't extinguish the fire of hell. Johnny directly from the surface of the water and left. On the other side, Blackheart felt Ghost Rider's approach and immediately sent Abigor to confront him. Just as Johnny arrived, he was ambushed by Abigor and thrown onto a car. Abigor then swiftly flew into the air. Seeing this, Johnny rode his chariot directly onto the rooftop to pursue, beginning to search again for Abigor's location. At this moment, the police chase helicopter also swiftly arrived on the scene. Johnny, wielding the chain in his hand, instantly wrapped it tightly around the helicopter, and then he began to pull with force. If this continued, The helicopter was bound to lose control and crash. At this critical moment, Johnny realized the pilot had committed no crimes and, ultimately, he couldn't bring himself to deliver a fatal blow. He threw the helicopter out with a chain. That's when Abigor appeared once again, persuading Johnny to join their ranks. However, Johnny remained unmoved. He reached out with both hands and grabbed Abigor, but Abigor had anticipated this move and turned into a gust of wind to escape. Facing another attack from Ghost Rider, Abigor couldn't help but mock him. Unexpectedly, as Johnny waved his hands, hellfire rapidly ignited along the chain. Following this, he swung the chain once more. With Johnny's swift motions, the hellfire formed a fiery tornado, trapping Abigor in the middle, rendering him immobile. Soon, Abigor was consumed by the flames, turning into nothingness. Now, only Wallow, Blackheart's last minion, remained. Johnny then mounted the motorbike again and he leapt straight out of the air. As he swung his chain, the motorcycle vertically raced up the wall. In the astonished eyes of the onlookers, Ghost Rider smashed into the ground. When the smoke cleared, Johnny had safely landed. Seeing this, the surrounding police immediately opened fire, but the bullets were ineffective. Johnny simply waved his arm, and hellfire blazed up instantly. By the time the police reacted, Johnny had already broken through the siege on his motorbike and he left with such ease. Blackheart witnessed everything from afar. Knowing he was no match at the time, he resorted to kidnapping Johnny's girlfriend, Roxanne. When Johnny rushed home upon hearing the news, Blackheart had already prepared an ambush. However, as Johnny transformed into Ghost Rider, the situation between the two instantly flipped. Johnny pinned Blackheart against the wall. Just as Johnny was about to use the penance stare, Blackheart began to laugh. It turns out the penance stare was useless against him, for Blackheart had no soul within him. Blackheart then launched his counterattack, seizing Johnny by the neck and slamming him to the ground. Blackheart told Johnny that if he wanted to save Roxanne, he should go to the cemetery to find the San Venganza contract, where he would be waiting for Johnny at San Venganza. Johnny immediately went to the cemetery, grabbing a shovel and preparing to dig for the contract, but Caretaker stopped him, breaking the shovel. It turns out the San Venganza contract was hidden right here. Caretaker handed the contract to Johnny and decided to give him a ride. As Caretaker whistled, a magnificent horse quickly emerged from the fog. In Johnny's astonished gaze, Caretaker skillfully mounted the horse, and as he donned his cowboy hat once more, hellfire began to blaze from his body. It turned out Caretaker was the previous generation Ghost Rider, Carter. At Johnny's question, Caretaker's steed is quickly transformed into a flaming warhorse.
Let's ride.
The two generations of Ghost Riders rode side by side through the night. Wherever their mounts passed, all was turned to ash, and two paths of fire blazed enduringly. At this moment, it was as if a legacy was being passed on, and Johnny would inherit the will of Ghost Rider. The two quickly arrived at San Venganza. Carter then warned Johnny that a Ghost Rider must stay in the shadows. Afterward, Carter handed his weapon over to Johnny. It turns out Carter's energy had been depleted. This was his last transformation into Ghost Rider. From here on, Johnny must walk the path alone. After saying this, Carter disappeared into the darkness. Then, Johnny headed to San Venganza alone. Suddenly, Wallow appeared and dragged Johnny into the water, intending to strangle him to death there. In this life-or-death crisis, Johnny transformed into Ghost Rider again. Even though they were in the water at the moment, the hellfire wouldn't go out at all. The hellfire burned Wallow directly into water vapor. Johnny then found Blackheart and took out the San Venganza contract to exchange for Roxanne. Just as Blackheart was about to take the scroll, Johnny suddenly transformed and knocked Blackheart to the ground with a punch. The scroll fell to the side during the fight. Blackheart reacted, striking Johnny and sending him flying, then turned to pick up the scroll. Seeing this, Johnny immediately grabbed a handful of hellfire and threw it at Blackheart. As Blackheart writhed in agony, a ray of sunlight suddenly appeared on the horizon. Ghost Rider's weakness. Under the sunlight, Johnny quickly returned to his normal form, while Blackheart seized the opportunity to grab the San Venganza contract. Next, Blackheart planned to release millions of evil spirits. If he succeeded in absorbing all their power, no force in the world could stop him. As all the evil spirits were absorbed, Blackheart's eyes turned crimson. He grabbed Johnny, and just as he was about to deal a harsh blow, Blackheart was suddenly sent flying. It turned out Roxanne had shot Blackheart with a shotgun, but such a conventional attack couldn't harm Blackheart. Seeing this, Johnny immediately placed the shotgun into the shadows. and it transformed into a flame gun. Its powerful blast shattered Blackheart. However, Blackheart, now immortal, would soon reassemble and regenerate. As Blackheart regained his form, Johnny had an idea. He stepped into the shadows and transformed into Ghost Rider, then grabbed Blackheart and used the penance stare again. Now, with tens of thousands of sinful souls within Blackheart, he could no longer escape judgment this time. Under the burning flames of hell, Blackheart's eyes were charred, and this sin-ridden demon was finally sent back to hell. After the crisis was averted, Mephistopheles found Johnny again. Johnny had fulfilled the evil spirit contract. Mephistopheles was to return Johnny's soul and take away the power of Ghost Rider. Unexpectedly, Johnny ultimately chose to refuse. He decided to continue bearing the curse, using the devil's power to fulfill the duties of an angel.